opening, the archaeologist's hands were shaking as she lifted the tiny finger bone from the Siberian cave floor. She had no idea she was holding the key to rewriting human history. That bone belonged to a 13-year-old girl whose father was one species of human and whose mother was another. A girl whose very existence proved that until just 40,000 years ago, Earth was home to at least 4 different kinds of humans, all living, breathing, and crossing paths in ways that would change everything we thought we knew about ourselves. Imagine Earth, the last family reunion 50,000 years ago. You could have walked through a single valley in Central Asia and met your Neanderthal cousins hunting mammoth with wooden spears, your Denisovan relatives scaling mountain peaks that would leave modern climbers gasping, the diminutive Homo floresiensis, barely 3 feet tall, craftily avoiding Komodo dragons on Indonesian islands, and scattered among them all small bands of modern humans, our direct ants beasts, just beginning their march toward global dominance. This wasn't science fiction. This was Tuesday. We weren't alone on this planet for most of our existence. For hundreds of thousands of years, multiple human species shared the Earth, each perfectly adapted to their environments, each with their own remarkable abilities. The Neanderthals survived ice ages that would have killed us. Denisovans thrived at altitudes where our lungs would collapse. The hobbits hunted pygmy elephants with stone tools while dodging apex predators. Yet today, when you look around, there's only us, only. Homo sapiens remains. What happened to everyone else? The story begins with the Neanderthal. Mystery, our closest relatives. The Neanderthals, for over 300,000 years they ruled Europe and Western Asia. They weren't the brutish cavemen. Hollywood imagined recent discoveries paint a dramatically different picture. Neanderthals buried their dead with flowers. They created jewelry from eagle talons. They cooked sophisticated meals and cared for disabled members of their communities for decades. Their brains were actually larger than ours. They had language, art, and complex social structures. But something went catastrophically wrong around 40,000 years ago. In 2024, scientists made a chilling discovery in a cave in southern France. They found the remains of a Neanderthal man they nicknamed Thorin. When researchers analyzed his DNA, they uncovered something deeply unsettling. Thorin's family line had been completely isolated from other Neanderthal groups for over 50,000 years, despite living just 2 weeks' walk from other communities. Think about that. Imagine your neighborhood being cut off from the rest of humanity for 50,000 years. No new people, no fresh genes, no outside connections. Thorin's DNA revealed extreme inbreeding within his isolated group, a genetic death spiral that was slowly strangling entire Neanderthal populations across Europe. The evidence shows that while our ants beasts were forming vast social networks, sharing knowledge and mates across thousands of miles, Neanderthals were fragmenting into isolated pockets, small groups huddled in caves, cut off from each other by invisible barriers of social dysfunction. But isolation wasn't their only problem. When modern humans expanded out of Africa, we brought something deadlier than any weapon: our diseases. Stanford researchers have the invisible killer uncovered what may be the smoking gun of Neanderthal extinction. Computer models show that the diseases modern humans carried from tropical Africa created an invisible biological barrier across Eurasia. We were walking biological warfare without even knowing it. For over 130,000 years after first contact, Neanderthals and modern humans coexisted in an uneasy stalemate in the Middle East. Neither group could advance into the other's territory. But diseases were quietly spreading through interbreeding, and modern humans had one crucial advantage. We'd survived the brutal disease environment of tropical Africa for millennia. Our immune systems were battle-tested. Neanderthals had adapted to European diseases, but they had no defense against malaria, sleeping sickness, and dozens of other African pathogens that we carried. When these diseases finally jumped species through interbreeding, they spread like wildfire through Neanderthal populations that had no immunity. Sound familiar? It's exactly what happened when Europeans reached the Americas. Indigenous populations, isolated for thousands of years, were decimated by diseases like smallpox and measles. Entire civilizations collapse, not from warfare, but from invisible microscopic invaders. The same scenario likely played out across Europe 40,000 years ago. Neanderthal communities, already weakened by inbreeding and isolation, couldn't survive the onslaught of African diseases. One by one, their populations crashed below sustainable levels. While the vanishing mountains people Neanderthals were struggling in Europe, another human species was thriving in the mountains of Asia. The Denisovans were ghostly figures known only from a handful of bone fragments and teeth found in Siberian caves. But their genetic legacy tells an incredible story. Denisovans possessed superhuman abilities that put modern athletes to shame. They could survive at altitudes above 15,000 feet, where the air is so thin that most humans would quickly develop fatal altitude sickness. Today only Tibetans and a few other high-altitude populations retain these abilities, and they inherited them directly from Denisovan ancestors. These mountain peoples weren't just surviving, they were exploring. Denisovan DNA appears in populations across thousands of miles from Siberia to Southeast Asia to the islands of Melanesia. They were apparently crossing bodies of water that would challenge modern sailors, reaching islands separated by treacherous seas. But like the Neanderthals, the Denisovans began disappearing around 30,000 years ago. The last known Denisovan remains date to this period again. The timing coincides precisely with the expansion of modern human populations into Asia. Some Denisovans survived by joining our communities. That teenage girl whose bones were found in Denisova Cave, the one with a Neanderthal mother and Denisovan father, represents something profound. She wasn't just genetic mixing, she was evidence of desperate alliances forming as populations collapsed. The hobbits last stand 8,000 away from the Siberian caves on the Indonesian island of Flores. The strangest human story of all was reaching its end. Homo floresiensis, the hobbits had survived for nearly 1 million years in one of the most dangerous environments on Earth, standing barely 3 feet tall with brains the size of a chimpanzee's. They should have been easy prey. But these tiny humans were remarkably clever. They crafted sophisticated stone tools, organized cooperative hunts, and somehow managed to take down stegodon pygmy elephants that were still several times their size. They survived volcanic eruptions, climate shifts, and predators that included Komodo dragons and giant carnivorous beasts. For 1 million years, nothing could stop them. Then, around 50,000 years ago, they vanished. The timing is unnervingly precise. Archaeological evidence shows modern humans reaching the Indonesian archipelago right around the time the last hobbit bones disappear from the fossil record. Was it competition for resources? Disease, direct conflict? We may never know exactly what happened in those final centuries, but local legends on Flores still speak of the Abu Gogo, small hairy people who lived in caves. Remarkably, these stories describe creatures that match the hobbit fossils in extraordinary detail. It's possible that some populations survived long enough to encounter the first modern human settlers, living on in oral tradition long after their bones turned to dust. As these human species, the Survivors disappeared one by one. Something remarkable was happening to the survivors. Modern humans weren't just replacing our extinct relatives, we were absorbing them. DNA analysis has revealed that almost everyone alive today carries genetic material from these vanished humans. Europeans and Asians have 1 to 4% Neanderthal DNA. Pacific Islanders carry up to 6% Denisovan genetic material. Even sub-Saharan Africans, long thought to be pure, Homo sapiens, show evidence of interbreeding with unknown archaic human species. We didn't simply drive our relatives to extinction. In their final generations, many joined, our communities became our ants. Beasts passed their genes down through countless generations to us. Every person reading this is part Neanderthal, part Denisovan, part mysterious archaic human. We are living museums of human diversity. Those absorbed genes weren't just passengers, they were lifesavers. Neanderthal DNA helps modern Europeans fight off viruses. Denisovan genes help Tibetans breathe at killing altitudes. DNA from unknown African archaic humans helps some populations resist malaria. Our extinct relatives' final gift was the genetic tools to survive in a rapidly changing world. But why us? Why did Homo sapiens, the climate killer, become the last human standing when our relatives were often stronger, smarter in some ways, or better adapted to specific environments? The answer may lie in timing. Around 40,000 years ago, Earth's climate entered a period of unprecedented chaos. The planet swung between extreme cold and relative warmth every few thousand years. Ice sheets advanced and retreated. Forests turned to grasslands overnight. In geological terms, animals migrated. Food sources vanished. Neanderthals had survived ice ages before, but never while dealing with competitive pressure from modern humans and devastating diseases. Denisovans had thrived in stable mountain environments, but couldn't adapt when their ranges fragmenting and contracting. The hobbits had survived volcanic eruptions and predators, but not the arrival of superior competitors. Modern humans had one advantage that proved decisive: social flexibility. While other human species organized into small, isolated bands, we formed vast, interconnected networks. When climate devastated one region, we could draw resources, knowledge, and people from thousands of miles away. When local populations crashed, immigrants arrived to fill the gap. We weren't necessarily smarter or stronger. We were more connected. By 28,000 years ago, the last extinction Neanderthal fires were going out in caves in Gibraltar. By 30,000 years ago, the last footprints were fading from mountain paths in Asia. The hobbit's tiny hand would never again craft a stone tool. For the first time in millions of years, Earth was home to only one human species. But we weren't truly alone. Every time you feel the urge to explore dangerous places that might be your Denisovan genes talking, Neanderthal bands cut off from each other by invisible barriers. Or will we remember the lesson of our success? That survival comes not from strength or intelligence alone, but from our ability to reach across differences, form connections, and work together. When everything falls apart, the bones of our extinct relatives whisper a warning from deep time. In a universe that has produced consciousness only once that we know of, we are the last humans. For now, we are all the humanity the universe has. The question is, what are we going to do with that responsibility?